and ISC West, thank you for having me here today. I have been looking forward to this for a long time, and we are going to have some fun this morning. As Mary Beth mentioned, I'm Rachel Wilson. In my day job today, I run cybersecurity, data protection, fraud prevention for Morgan Stanley's wealth management business. And what that means in a nutshell is that I and my team are responsible for making sure that every system, every network, every application that we field to our 15,000 financial advisors around the country, our 15 million clients around the world, that all of those systems are as time-tested, battle-hardened, hacker-proofed as possible before we put them out there in the universe. So just like all of you as fellow practitioners, I'm living in that trench every day, fighting off the baddies, externally, internally, all of the many folks that want to do us harm. And that is why it is such a pleasure and an honor to be with all of you this morning. You're doing this with me, and I'm looking forward to the next few days. As Mary Beth mentioned, by way of background, I spent the first 15 years of my career all at the National Security Agency, the NSA, where I had a few different jobs. I spent a couple of years there running the NSA's counterterrorism operations mission. Think of that in layman's terms as using technical means to get onto the devices used by terrorists. So this is their laptops, their tablets, their smartphones. We would read their emails, listen to their phone calls, geolocate them, and then my favorite part of the job, what we used to call kinetic remediation. This, of course, is where you're taking those bad guys off of the battlefield. There are days today that I wish I still had some of those tools in my arsenal. My guess is you all do too. But I will admit that was a pretty stressful job. For the ladies in the audience, that's when I started coloring my hair. When you have that inflection point that you know your job is taking years off your life, as a bit of a reward, I then got to spend the next 3 years in London helping the British get ready for the 2012 Summer Olympics. So we all watched Paris last summer, great Olympic Games. I can tell you firsthand that the French are very happy that those games are behind them. And for all of you in the security space, you appreciate why. Every 4 years, when those games roll around, the eyes of the world become laser focused on that city, that country, and that includes the eyes of terrorists, the eyes of hackers. Physical security, digital security, human security, all together in one big festering mess. And that was certainly true in 2012 in London. So the British, given their history, very well versed in terrorist plotting, they had the terrorism threats well in hand. So we took a divide and conquer approach. The Brits took the terrorists, the Americans, we took the hackers. We managed the cyber threat. So we built a whole security operations center in the basement of the American Embassy. I brought over 60 of my NSA hackers. We had the Chinese trying to hack into the clocks, the timers at the Olympic venues. We had the Russians trying to get into the databases that house the Olympic drug testing records. Which, yes, makes perfect sense now, made no sense to us at the time. All kinds of miscreants looking to rub some grit in the eyes of the British. I was thrilled to see those games go off without a hitch, return home to suburban Maryland to where the NSA is headquartered, to spend my last 3 years in what I would tell all of you on a personal note was my dream job. This, of course, was running the NSA's cyber exploitation operations mission. Think of this as your professional American hackers. And in this job, I would travel around the United States trying to recruit the best crop of computer scientists, computer engineers, IT professionals coming out of American universities. Now, these kids were getting big six-figure offers from the likes of big tech and big banking. I was offering them government peanuts in exchange. But I did have one thing that no one else could offer them, and frankly, that was the opportunity to do something that would be illegal anywhere else. And for a particular ilk of young person, you know some of these kids, that opportunity to no longer be beholden to the Computer Fraud and Abuses Act, quite an alluring proposition. So we'd bring these kids in, we'd give them 18 months of highly classified training, and then we would conduct hundreds of operations a day, hacking into the networks of the Russians, the Chinese, the North Koreans, the Iranians, stealing the secrets out of their networks, giving them to our policymakers, our war fighters, all with the goal of keeping the United States and her allies safe. Now, I tell you this was a dream job, and that was in part because as a technologist, I got to work pretty much every technology on the planet, including a bunch of things you can't even buy in the United States. So think diplomatically pouched in indigenous Iranian firewalls, cracked versions of Windows that you can only find in North Korea. We'd pouch these things in, we would reverse engineer them, discover the underlying vulnerabilities in them, use those vulnerabilities back against our adversaries. Also a dream job as a leader. Like so many of you, I got to lead an incredibly talented team. These young men, and gentlemen, they were almost exclusively men, were very smart, very patriotic, and honestly, very weird. But they were motivated, right? And you think about the idea that every day we were bringing back what we used to call eye-watering intelligence, information that was so remarkable that when you thought about the fact that you were going to put it on the president's desk the next morning, brought a little bit of a tear to your eye. You can all tell I am incredibly proud of the work that the NSA and the intelligence community did in my tenure. I remain incredibly proud of the work that they do to protect us and defend us every day. And I have never been more proud than these last 3 years. Look at the world around us. Russia, China, now the war in the Middle East. These men and women are working 24/7, 365 days a year to protect us, and they are doing an incredible job. That said, there are definitely some things about being the quote-unquote queen of the hackers at the NSA that I do not miss. Some management challenges that are very unique to that workforce. Top of the list of management challenges as the queen of the hackers at the National Security Agency, hygiene. These men, very smart, very patriotic, not very shower motivated. How many of you have had a 12-year-old boy? How many of you have been a 12-year-old boy? You smelled bad. And those kids that never grow out of that phase, they all came to work for me. It got to the point where we actually had shower caddies in my office. Joe would come in the morning, we'd give him a little bit of the sniff test. Is Joe ready for human interaction? No. Let's send him downstairs to the showers. Other big problem on a day-to-day basis, gaming addiction. Now, I can tell you back then, I knew nothing about the symptoms of gaming addiction. Now, as the mother of an 18-year-old son, I am an expert in the symptoms of gaming addiction. But it got so bad that we actually hired a psychologist on staff. We were doing Xbox interventions, PlayStation confiscations. We were getting mothers and sisters and girlfriends involved. Think about it this way. If you have an employee who is routinely late to work, that's a problem. But if you are late to work at the NSA, I have to send the police to your house. I have to work with the assumption that you are on a plane to Moscow because, right, that happened. I don't miss this. I can tell you at Morgan Stanley today, for better or worse, folks show up to work on time. They smell pretty good. My day job has improved in all of those ways. So what are we going to talk about this morning, ISC West? Well, I've got a lot of ground to cover. I'm a New Yorker now, so I'm going to talk fast. I want to start by giving you all a sense of my source of sleepless nights as the head of cybersecurity for a large bank. I don't sleep well these last 8 years. My guess is that all of you in the security space don't sleep well either. But if I do my job right this morning, none of y'all will be sleeping tonight. We will all be cyber insomniacs together. Then I want to pivot to what I worry about for all of you, the businesses, the entities, the organizations you support. My claim to all of you today, 25 years in the cybersecurity space, I have never seen the situation more dire than it is today. The risk environment has never been more pronounced. And then we're going to close this morning with some cybersecurity best practices, a call to action for all of you. The situation is dire, but all is not lost. And there is much that we can and should be doing to protect ourselves, not just in the hats that we are wearing here today, but all of you are also citizens in your community. You are mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers, sons and daughters and wives and husbands, and I'll argue this morning that in all of those capacities, you are a potential target for cyber actors. We've got to be diligent in all of our capacities. I'll also tell you, though, that I do not have any hope or expectation that any of you are going to leave here today doing all of the things that we are going to talk about. And that's okay. I tell people all the time, cybersecurity is not about perfection. It is really about not being the sickest gazelle in the herd. So that is my hope, that all of you will leave here this morning, this week, with a handful of things that you are going to do differently at work, at home, in all of your capacities to be safer cyber citizens. Sound like a plan? All right. So with that said, why don't I sleep in this job? Well, at the top of my list of sleepless nights these last 8 years, without a doubt, North Korea. Why? North Korea is up against staunch international sanctions, has no domestic economy to speak of, and yet is trying to fund a wildly expensive missile and nuclear program. How are they doing this? How is North Korea funding its government in 2025? Well, they've essentially made it a major plank of their national strategy that they're going to fund their government by hacking into banks and other entities and stealing money, right? The old adage, why rob banks? It's where the money is. We just never expected to see a nation take this on as the source of their gross domestic product, but that is exactly what North Korea has done, and what's unfortunate for all of us in this room this morning playing defense, the North Koreans have proven to be very effective and successful with their hacking strategy. Now, I tell my kids all the time how fortunate they are that they did not grow up in North Korea. My teenage daughter says that having me as a mom feels like living in North Korea. This is not fair. The reality is, though, that it is children who are making up the backbone of North Korea's hacking industry. If you are raised in North Korea, on your 11th birthday, you are administered an aptitude test. You score best and brightest on that North Korean intelligence exam, and you are immediately on-ramped into the hacking program. Estimates now have it at 12,000 people within North Korea's government that have hacking as their full-time job, and those ranks just continue to grow. Now, what are all these people doing? If you go back in time, 2016, the Bank of Bangladesh heist, carried out by the notorious advanced persistent threat actor known as the Lazarus Group, successfully hacks into the Central Bank of Bangladesh, carts off close to $100 million over a long weekend. Now, the two things that not everybody appreciates about that particular heist is that the North Koreans were a typographical error away, literally a spelling mistake away from that being close to $1 billion. Now you fast forward to last year, the North Koreans have only broadened, expanded their appetite. Look up the Bybit hack. 1.5 billion in cryptocurrency stolen by the North Korean government over a course of hours. These are non-trivial dollar sums they're going after, and they are equal opportunity. They don't care who you are. This has gotten so pronounced that last year the United Nations published a report supporting the allegations of 27 countries around the world, all of whom are asserting that the North Koreans have come after their critical infrastructure to the tune of more than $3 billion in losses over the last 3 years. Now, that number is staggering when you think about the losses, but it is terrifying when you think about where that money is going, right into their missile and nuclear program. Now, if that weren't bad enough, since the start of the war in the Middle East, I'm losing a lot of sleep over Iran, and I'd argue all of you too should be. Now, Iran, very different animal. They are not hacking us for money. They've got plenty of money thanks to their oil industry. The Iranians have long figured out that cyber represents an asymmetric threat. Think about it this way. Sailing an aircraft carrier into New York Harbor, that's a decade-long project. Building a nuclear weapon, thank God, has proven to be very challenging. So what do the Iranians do when tensions get fraught with the West? They literally put 40 guys in the basement of a building in Tehran and managed to wreak havoc. This is exactly what they do to us in banking. 2012 to 2014, bank to bank to bank on Wall Street, wildly disruptive denial of service attacks, all in retaliation for economic sanctions, military activity, cyber actions. When you look at the war in the Middle East today, what is the common denominator between Hamas, Hezbollah, the Houthis? Both spiritually and financially, Iran is behind all of this, and all of us need to be braced for impact. But what is the sea change? Why is it so important, ISC West, that you are spending the next few days talking about cybersecurity as a component of overall security? My argument to you today is that we have seen a sea change in security in the last 5 years. If you went back in time 5 years ago, The vast majority of malicious cyber activity that we saw on the internet was nation states, right? It was Rachel in her NSA capacity, it was the Russians, the Israelis, the British, the Chinese, all of these countries hacking each other to conduct espionage and to gather intelligence. Now, make no mistake, all of that intelligence gathering and hacking is still going on. And with Russia and Ukraine, my God, it is going on at an unprecedented scale. But all of that is now dwarfed by the rise of cyber criminal syndicates. Now, 70% of the malicious cyber traffic that we see on the internet is criminal in nature and is financially motivated. If you took all the cyber criminals in the world and put them in one country, they would be the third largest economy the world has ever seen. 11 trillion in revenue last year alone. And these guys are not hacking you because you're you. They are hacking you because you are vulnerable. They're opportunistic, they are egalitarian, they are simply doing scans of broad swaths of the internet, looking for entities with an open door, an open window. They get in, and they figure out how to monetize that access. Now, why have we seen this tremendous rise? No surprise, this is due to the proliferation of artificial intelligence and the democratization of very advanced nation-state level cyber capabilities. AI has lowered the barrier to entry to being a quite sophisticated cyber actor and has increased the scope, the scale, the velocity of cyber activities to a level that boggles the mind from where we were 5 years ago. Think about what it used to take to be a cyber actor. You needed an advanced degree in a technical field. You needed access to a nation-state hacking toolkit. You needed nation-state level training. What do you need in 2025? A little bit of ChatGPT, watch some YouTube videos. Now you are off to the races as a quite sophisticated cyber actor. And that means all of us need to take notice. Now, I want to give you an example this morning of the kind of AI-enabled cyber attack that I see in my day job every day of the week. And I would argue that any of you who are responsible for defending an internet-facing gateway, a portal that you make accessible to employees or to customers, all of you are experiencing this same form of credential validation attack on a regular basis. So in my case, I presented this attack 2 weeks ago to my board of directors. It did not go well. You will soon see why. Hackers started by going out to the dark web and buying 10 million credential pairs, logins and passwords. These logins and passwords have nothing to do with your entity, nothing to do with mine. These are the logins and passwords from the LinkedIn hack, Yahoo, Home Depot, Target, Equifax. In this case, it was the Uber breach last summer. Hackers go out, they get into the database that houses all the customer logins and passwords, dump them all for sale on the dark web, sell them pennies on the dollar. Why does this new hacker want all of those logins and passwords from Uber? It's because he knows that many of us are victims of that particular form of human frailty that causes us to reuse the same login and password again and again and again. Now, I know smart security experts that we have in the room here today, none of y'all are doing this, right? You, uh-oh. are not using the same terrible password everywhere, knowing that if it gets compromised anywhere, you are then at risk everywhere you've used it. But passwords are a pain. And if I had to guess, your CEO, your customer base, they are all doing this. And that's what the hacker is hoping for, that maybe that password you were using at Target is the same one you are using at your bank account. So the hacker is going to take those 10 million logins and passwords, throw them against my authentication gateway just to see what sticks. But how long would that take to fat finger in all of those logins and passwords? Hacker would be typing for the rest of his life. Hence, artificial intelligence to the rescue. Have ChatGPT gen up that Python script for me. Further speed up the process by going back to the dark web and renting a botnet. What's a botnet? Simply thousands of highly hackable endpoint devices. These are your Internet of Things type devices, smart TVs, smart toasters. My attack 2 weeks ago was a herd of smart refrigerators. Imagine me explaining to Morgan Stanley's board of directors that we were, no kidding, under attack by a herd of refrigerators. Guys, they were asking all the wrong questions. What was the make and model of the refrigerator? Was my refrigerator implicated in the attack? Let's move on, right? But this was the reality. Millions of credential pairs, thousands of refrigerators slamming into my front door just to see what sticks. The botnet is not smart. All it returns is a simple thumbs up, thumbs down. Vast majority of cases, thumbs down. This login and password do not work for a customer of this bank. But for that small but non-zero percentage that return a thumbs up, what happens next? Hackers logging into those accounts, setting up bill payments, money movements, all the kinds of things you would have seen a traditional fraudster do, but now powered by AI and operating at scope, scale, velocity. So where does that bring us here in 2025? We're a couple months in, and I will tell you, I am already referring to this year as the year of the 3 R's: Russia, ransomware, and resilience. So let's dive in. Let's start with Russia. The Russians, well, I'll ask you this. Since I'm not sure anymore whether the Russians are our friends or our enemies, right? They're this sort of classic frenemy now, I guess. But how many of you as security professionals think that Putin and his very potent cyber army are just sitting this war out? I see no hands. You guys are spot on. The reality is that Russia's cyber army has been very, very active over these last few years. And I say this begrudgingly as a patriot and as a former civil servant. The Russian cyber strategy in this war has been ingenious. What the Russians are doing is hiding in the noise of all of that cyber criminal syndicate activity that we just discussed. They are using all of this criminal activity to obfuscate their nation-state level cyber attacks, to avoid attribution, to avoid escalation. The last thing they want is another full frontal cyber attack, slap in the face, colonial pipeline style. They want to hide in that noise, taking very much a boil the frog approach, slowly ratcheting up the heat, again avoiding that escalation and attribution. But the attacks they are conducting have been massively deleterious to American industry, and if any of you are doing business around, within Ukraine, or in ways that potentially support Ukrainian refugees, make no mistake, the Russians are in your business. Now, let me give you an example of what these nation-state level cyber attacks have looked like in financial services. And I'm asking you your question in a second, so brace for impact. If we went back in time 5 years ago, before the war with Russia and Ukraine, if I asked any of you, what percentage of the accounts, bank accounts, being opened at your typical American retail bank, think your Bank of America, your Wells Fargo, your PNC, what percentage of the accounts being opened every morning were fraudulent? What would you say?
I'd say about 15 to 20%.
This is an excellent guess. 15 to 20%, which sounds like a stunning number, actually would have been the best day of my life. That would have been awesome. The reality is that even 5 years ago, at your big American retail bank, the percentage of accounts being opened every day that were fraudulent was more like 30 to 40%. What was going on? Well, there are these huge human farms in places like Bangladesh, Ghana, Sierra Leone, massive warehouses filled with people sitting next to big stacks of stolen identities. They open a bank account in your name at Wells Fargo, another bank account in your name at Bank of America. They link those two bank accounts and they harvest the 75-cent micro deposit that banks send each other when you link an account. If you've ever linked your corporate or personal account to an outside entity, you've seen this, those tiny little ACH payments that go back and forth to verify both ends of that transaction. There are entire communities in Bangladesh that are living off of the harvesting of these micro deposits. 75 cents doesn't sound like a lot, but if you are doing this hundreds of times a day across hundreds of people, again, entire communities. 30 to 40%, you'd also ask the question, why weren't the banks doing anything about this? And the reality is that the cost of preventing that fraudulent account from being opened was more than 75 cents. So the banks were treating this as a retail shrinkage problem, a cost of doing business, until the Russians took notice. The Russians see this trend and they view it correctly as an opportunity. Now let's fast forward 3 months before the start of the war between Russia and Ukraine. And just like all of you, your banks, we all work together in this space. We're on the phone 3 times a week talking about what we see in the cyber risk landscape. And all of a sudden, the numbers of fraudulent accounts are going up and up. By January, it's 60% fraudulent. Holy cow. Now it's February, 75% fraud. Finally, it's March. Tanks are rolling across the border into Ukraine. My best friend of 20 years at PNC calls me Saturday morning, says, Rachel, we got to get on an emergency call. We've hit 95% fraud. They had lost $14 million in 2 weeks. They had basically become a criminal enterprise, and they had decided to take the unprecedented step of actually taking their new account opening flow off of the internet. Other banks quickly followed suit, and for 3 weeks in that March, if you wanted to open a bank account in the United States, you had to walk into a branch and exist as a real person. Now, what was going on here? I can tell that some of you have already cracked the code on this one. What we discovered over the next 6 months, and with the help of our brethren in some 3-letter agencies, is that this attack was not criminal at all. Was it expensive? Oh, without a doubt. But the intent was not to steal money. Rather, the intent of this Russian nation-state cyber attack was to make it impossible for millions of Ukrainian refugees to move money into the safe harbor of American banks while the Russians completed their invasion. This was not financially motivated, but rather a bona fide denial of service attack designed to stymie the flight of capital from Ukraine while the Russians tightened the noose. Think about what this might look like in your business, in your organization. The Russians are everywhere in this environment. Now, if that weren't bad enough, that brings me to my second R, ransomware. Ransomware attacks, by far the most lucrative form of cyber attack the world has ever seen. $20 billion in losses just in the United States last year. These attacks are not the pop-up on your laptop asking for $500 in iTunes gift cards. These attackers are globally distributed, highly commoditized, very sophisticated in their activities. The average ransom payment now is more than $2 million. And these attackers are all conducting what we call triple extortion scams. The hackers start by getting into your environment and stealing whatever data you value most. This could be corporate information. This could be employee records. This could be your source code. Whatever data you would be willing to pay to have restored, willing to pay not to have sold on the dark web. And these attacks are not limited to small and mid-sized companies. This is nonprofits. This is houses of worship, university endowments, hospitals, school districts. Any entity with two nickels to rub together and data that you value, potentially a target. Hackers get in, they spend weeks, months siphoning off whatever data you value most. You have no idea this is going on. You then show up on a Monday morning to find everything broken. Your back-end database is encrypted. Your production environment is corrupted. Your front-end website has been defaced. Your computer's all blue screen of death. You are, for all intents and purposes, dead in the water from a production perspective. You then receive the first of 3 very spooky phone calls. Hackers will call you, "Happy Monday, you've noticed everything is broken. I, hacker, am happy to help. I just need $500,000 in this cryptocurrency equivalent in this wallet in South Africa by 2 o'clock this afternoon. And if the money's not there by 2 o'clock, make it $600,000. They will continue to ratchet up that ransom until you are willing to pay. Now you call me, you call your cyber expert, they are going to tell you, do not pay the ransom. Why? If you pay that ransom, you have now told the world that you are a person who will pay a ransom. And that means that the hackers will just keep coming back. City of Baltimore, near and dear to my heart, both as a municipal client at Morgan Stanley's and as my home for many, many years working at the NSA, has now paid a ransom 6 times to the same hacking group to restore the same data that they are accessing through the same unpatched server. This is the definition of insanity. But instead of fixing the problem, what the city of Baltimore has done is now just baked this into the city budget. That there will be an annual pot set aside for ransom payments. You do not want to be in this space. I don't want you to pay. The irony is that most people, upwards of 80% of entities, pay. And when you do, you will then have the best customer service experience of your life. These hackers will be on the phone with your IT guy in 5 minutes. They will be debugging your router, decrypting your database, fixing your computers. I had a client tell me 2 weeks ago that her networks had never run faster than the day after her ransomware attack. These guys are very reputationally sensitive. They will send you, I am not kidding, a customer survey after this. How was your ransomware experience with us? They want you to come back to ISC West next year and say, yeah, we got hacked by the Bulgarians. It was delightful. They were great guys. But I don't want you to pay. You pay, they're not done with you. They're going to call you back Tuesday. Pleasure doing business with you. While we were in your network, we also stole all of your data. And if you don't want us to sell your data on the dark web to your closest competitor, we're going to need another $500,000 in that cryptocurrency equivalent. And now we know that you are both willing and able to pay. Maybe you pay, maybe you don't. They're still not done. Again, these are triple extortion scams. What the hackers know is what everyone in this room knows. They don't want a one-time payment. They want a continuous revenue model. On Wednesday, they're going to pitch you on a product you never knew you needed. Ransomware as a service. They call you back and they make you an offer that you cannot refuse, that in exchange for a monthly fee in perpetuity, they will help keep your systems up and running. They're now part of your IT department. They will agree not to sell your data on the dark web tomorrow. This is honor amongst thieves now. They will agree, this is the kicker, to actually help protect you from other hacking groups that want to come in and do the exact same thing. This is mafia-style protection money. In exchange for that fee, they will tell the dark web that you are their turf. I am sad to report that I have hundreds of clients now who are not happily but are quite willingly paying one Eastern European hacking gang to theoretically protect them from the rest. This is the brave new world we are living in 2025, which brings us to our third R, resilience. What are we doing about all of this? A lot of what we recommend in cybersecurity is not the sexy stuff. This is the stuff that is the brushing your teeth and eating your Wheaties of cybersecurity. It's free, but that doesn't mean it's easy. It's simple things like keeping all of your systems fully patched and up to date. If you do nothing else, keeping your operating systems, your browsers, the apps on your phone, again, fully patched, the number one thing you can do to protect yourselves. When software manufacturers, as they always do, discover new flaws, new bugs, new vulnerabilities in their code, they issue you that fix in the form of that patch, that software update. When that patch is released, we enter into a race condition with the hackers. For us, that patch is the solution to the security vulnerability we didn't even know we had. But for the hackers, that patch is an opportunity. The hacker is going to reverse engineer the patch, discover the underlying vulnerabilities that it mitigates, weaponize those vulnerabilities against anyone who is not yet patched. The onus is on us, as consumers and as security professionals to execute that patch quickly and comprehensively. Do not let your CEO be like my daughter. Mom, there's no new fonts, there's no new emojis, I can't go without my phone for 20 minutes. Go ahead and patch. Next, we got to talk about backups. You're all thinking, well, my data's backed up, I'm not going to pay. When was the last time you exercised your backup strategy? The number of companies that I have met with that have sworn, hand over heart, Rachel, we've got a 3-2-1 backup strategy, 3 copies of our data, 2 geographically dispersed locations, one of them is off the grid. They call me back 2 weeks later when they are in the throes of their cyber bad day, only to discover that the guy who did their backup strategy doesn't work here anymore, and all they found in his desk was a copy of Windows for Dummies, and they're not feeling so good at this point. You gotta pull the plug on your own systems on a regular basis to see what happens. Do you actually know how to restore from your backups? You want to train like you're going to fight. You do not want to be developing your cyber strategy in the midst of your cyber war. And that brings me to my final point for all of you this morning. What many of us are finding is that in the security space, it's not enough anymore for us to be defending ourselves, our companies, our organizations, and our entities. All too often now, our regulators, our investors, our shareholders, our government agencies are expecting that we are also protecting and defending our employees, our clients, our customers, our constituents. So your perimeter is ever expanding. And I don't know about all of you, but what I discovered over the pandemic is that my customers got real dumb. And this idea that I am now supposed to know when my customer is operating under duress, operating under false pretense, I am having to extend that perimeter of protection. So just this morning, some of you saw me on the phone frantically working before we had our conversation here today. I was on the phone with a client that I fear I'm going to get to know really, really well over the next few weeks. A woman named Barbara lives not far from me on the Upper West Side in Manhattan, made the mistake yesterday of answering the phone. Do not answer the phone if you don't know who's calling you. Tell your parents not to answer the phone. Barbara picks up the phone, becomes convinced that Microsoft is calling her. Microsoft is never going to call you, guys. Even when you want them to call you, they are not going to call you. Barbara is convinced that they're calling her. Then she tells me that she has a MacBook. Barbara, you really thought Microsoft was calling you about your MacBook, huh? She picks up the phone, she says, they've told her she has malware on her computer and they want to help. She gives them remote access to her machine. They then install the malware, keystroke loggers, screenshots, pictures of every website she's going to, harvesting everything. They tell her her computer is fixed, but that they want to make sure everything is working. Can you imagine your mother doing this? Can you imagine your CEO doing this? Gives them remote access, says everything's fixed, we're going to make sure everything's working. They have Barbara 4 hours on the phone, logging into all of her bank accounts, her brokerage accounts, credit cards, IRS.gov, Social Security Administration. Coup de grace, they have her log into her Verizon account. Why? They set up auto forwarding of all of her text messages. All of those one-time passcodes that we're sending you to verify that you are who you say you are, they're getting all of these in real time. My security team calls me at 4 a.m. this morning. Thank you. These are my guys in Singapore. They say Barbara is either on a very exotic vacation to Gabon, Africa, or she has been hacked. I have her on the phone this morning, 9 a.m. in the East Coast. She says, yeah, Rachel, I got hacked, but Microsoft fixed it. Oh boy. We have basically had Barbara declare cyber bankruptcy. She is throwing that computer away. We're having her buy a new laptop. We get to the end of the conversation and Barbara admits to me that she has been using the password kittens25 everywhere for the last decade. I give her the same talk I know you give your teams. Barbara, I want you using a password manager app, letting it generate unique, complex passwords for you, storing those passwords in a cryptographically sound way, auto-filling them right into that password field for you based on either a passphrase or even better than by that biometric. Why do I love these? Maximally lengthy, unique, complex passwords. If it's a 50-character password field, they will give you a 50-character password, random alphanumerics that humans are terrible at generating, but the computers are great at. And Barbara, you don't have to remember that password. It's going to be auto-filled for you. Barbara says, Rachel, I hear you. That all sounds very complicated. I am going to add an exclamation point. Barbara's plan is kittens25 for the next decade. She thinks that's going to fool the North Koreans, but I hope for all of you this morning joining our session today, enjoying the rest of ISC West, you will take much better advice away from this. Thank you guys all so much.